All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome back. I don't know if you guys can tell, but my throat is definitely a little bit scratchy. My voice is a little bit hoarse, and I've been sick these past like 2 or 3 days. And I fucking knew I was gonna get sick because I was teaching class on Sunday at jiu-jitsu, and I kept walking around and hearing people be like, "Oh, my throat's scratchy. Oh, I've been sneezing. Oh, no, 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 da, da." And I was like, "Fuck, I'm gonna get sick." And sure enough, I woke up Monday morning. All the symptoms that they were talking about in class just hit me. So I'm working through it. If I cough and stuff, I'll try to edit it out. So if you guys see, like sudden breaks in the video, that's why I probably edited it to avoid my coughing. But anyway, we obviously have UFC 309 this weekend with John Jones fighting Stipe Miocic. But I did want to take just like a few seconds here and talk about the bout coming up on Friday night between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Now, Jake Paul is a betting favorite going into this fight, and honestly with good reason. He's literally 30 years younger than Mike Tyson. I mean, the age gap between them is greater than how old Jake Paul actually is. Mike Tyson has lived like 2 of Jake Paul's lifetimes and then some. And we've got a guy in Stipe Miocic who is fighting at 42 years old this coming weekend, right? But in general, I feel like 40 is a safe cutoff limit. You usually see guys hit that 40-year mark, and that's when things kind of really start going downhill. It's hard to get it back, right? After any time there is like a late career resurgence after 40. I also think about steroids. That's like the first thing that comes to mind. I'm like, okay, you're on something if you have this late resurgence. But it's not like Tyson is 40, 45, 50, 55. I mean, he's approaching 60 years old. And Paul is probably the betting favorite for good reason in this fight. I mean, I'm giving Tyson a chance in this one because I feel like Jake Paul has lost to a relatively good boxer in Tommy Fury, but not a world-class boxer. And not that Tyson is obviously at that world-class level anymore, but he was at one point. And I think the biggest question in this fight is just going to be, can the body keep up with the mind? Because Tyson has a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge in boxing. He understands angles, but none of that's going to matter if your body won't respond the way you want it to. Now, I think he's probably on just about every supplement you can get, right? And that's going to help quite a bit. But is it going to be enough to overcome a 30-year age gap? That's what we're going to find out on Friday night, right? So I do think Jake Paul's going to win. I think we'll be a little bit disappointed as a country. I don't want this fight to happen necessarily. I don't think it does anything for boxing. I just think it does a lot for Jake Paul. And if Tyson beats him, I mean, hey, great, you knocked off the YouTube kid. But at the same time, what does that have to, it doesn't do anything for your legacy. I feel like a win by Jake Paul, especially if he could pick up like a knockout, man, I don't know. Obviously, it doesn't. This fight isn't going to take anything away from Tyson's career, but it just kind of tarnishes it a little bit at the end, So hopefully Tyson can go out and pull it off and pick up the win. I think it would shut a lot of people up. I think it would slow this Jake Paul shit down. But hey, we'll see. You know how America's rooting? They're all rooting the same way I am, the same way you guys all are. They all want to see Tyson go out there and win and put a stop to this. But fuck, we're going to find out on Friday night on Netflix. So I think Jake Paul's going to win. I think it'll be a disappointing night for me, but I am hoping that the reflexes and all that shit is still there for Mike Tyson. We'll see. But all right, big card obviously coming up this weekend in UFC 309. Eric Anders versus Chris Weidman is on this card on the prelims, and I think they were in the main card spot originally, at least according to MMA Junkie when I looked like a week ago. But really what I feel like the first 3 fights on this card are about, I feel like the first 3 fights on this main card are really about showcasing the young upcoming talent in the UFC, right? In the first fight, we got Mauricio Rufy versus James Yontop. And Rufy is a guy who is going to draw comparisons to Conor McGregor. Everything from his stance, even the way he carries himself, right? Like his posture, the look on his face, the confidence that he brings into the octagon. All of that stuff is reminiscent of Conor McGregor. And he's very fucking accurate. He's fast. He has unorthodox entries into the legs to hit his takedowns and stuff like that. He's a different kind of guy. He's explosive. He's very creative. And he does a great job with distance and range management. Now, 10 victories, 10 knockouts, right? This guy's 10 for 10 so far on finishing guys. He hasn't been knocked out once in his career. If you go back and watch that fight, it was kind of a clinch-heavy exchange. And he got pushed up against the cage a lot, was battling, probably wearing the arms out. And you'll notice he starts to carry his arms a bit low, and then he gets backed up against the cage and hit with a big overhand left that just dropped him. And the guy that he was fighting, I forget his name off the top of my head, put him out. So he does have some cracks that you can exploit. And I think for Yontop, a guy who, look, he's not gonna be as explosive as Rufy, right? He's not gonna have all these creative ass setups that Rufy's gonna have. He's not gonna have the diversity in his skill set. But sometimes in fighting, you just gotta fight. And James Yontop does a good job of that. He just marches you forward. He stays in your face, and he pressures you back against the cage. Now, I'm interested to see what can happen if Yontop's able to get a hold of him and kind of wear him out a little bit. And also, Yontop will commit to the leg kicks, right? And like I said, there's nothing fancy, but sometimes you don't need that. He just stays in the guy's face and boxes you. I think he's going to get hit with a lot of big shots. But another important factor in this is that Yontop has 18 professional fights, and he's never been knocked out. He's only 25 years old, and sometimes it's hard to crack that chin on those young guys for the first time. So if Rufy's not able to do that, and Yontop can just turn this into a little bit of a gritty fight and maybe beat up the legs and just keep the boxing combinations in his face, he has a chance in this fight, man. I mean, Rufy, the key for him is going to be to control the range, keep everything at distance, and snipe. He's also great at countering, right? He just kind of like, he'll lure things out of you, and once you throw, he gets just out of range, slides back in and pops guys with stuff. So Yontop has to stay away from that, and I think the best way to do that is just to keep Rufy behind the black line. Keep his back against the cage, limit the room that he has to work with, and he might have a chance. But overall, man, Rufy is special. And like I said, I think this is a showcase for young talent on Saturday night, and I think we're going to see him shine through in the spotlight here. He's in a big spot, and I think he'll come up big. All right, next fight. Speaking of young talent, Bo Nickal versus Paul Craig. Now, on paper, and if you look at the betting odds, Bo Nickal is a massive favorite, but I have a feeling that this is not going to be an easy fight for him, right? Maybe it is. Maybe, watch. Every time I say some fucking shit like that, he goes out, like something will happen where he goes out there and he knocks him out or whatever. But Paul Craig is an excellent jiu-jitsu artist. I mean, he triangled Jamal Hill, a former world champion. Ankalaev looks like he's about to fight for the title when he triangled him in the last second of their fight. So he's got a very good ground game, and I just think that for Bo Nickal, this is by far the most experienced guy that he's run into. Now, Bo Nickal has an advantage in terms of wrestling. He's probably faster. He'll be faster. Not only is he faster, but he's going to have, I think he'll have more power in his hands, right? And he's just going to have a big advantage in terms of striking. Now, one thing that you will see from Bo Nickal, though, is a little bit of overextending on some of these big shots, like leaving himself open in those striking exchanges. I just think that no one's really capitalized on it yet. And to be honest with you, Paul Craig probably isn't going to be the guy that starts fucking like, digging into the holes in Bo Nickal's striking game. He's probably not going to be the guy that exploits that. But Bo Nickal is a wrestler at the end of the day, right? And when this fight goes to the ground, a lot of the times just being fucking annoying and controlling posture can pay off in dividends as the rounds start to wear on him. Bo Nickal has finished so many of his fights so quickly that it'll be interesting to see what things start to look like if Craig is put in a position where he's comfortable on his back and can survive. If he can manage to not get submitted by Bo Nickal, what does this look like in the second and third round when Nickal's energy kind of starts to dissipate a little bit? I just think that Bo Nickal is so young in his career and he's got so much wrestling experience that he's got to find a way to transition that to MMA. And if he can go out there and get a finish over Paul Craig on the ground, the hype train is going to be, I mean, it's already, he's got a lot of steam behind it and everything, but I really think it'll pick up, and we'll be all in on Bo Nickal if he can go in there, and especially if he can submit somebody like Paul Craig. But we'll see. I think the ground exchanges in this one are going to be, very interesting, man, just because, like I said, on paper, Bo Nickal is going to get on top. He's the better wrestler. He's going to have all those setups and shit, but Paul Craig is just crafty. And like I said, if he can just keep it annoying, or he'll hit you with some of those quick hitters. Like you don't see him coming, and all of a sudden he's throwing up an armbar, or he's on your legs attacking heel hooks and ankle locks, or he's throwing up a triangle. I mean, he's got threats off his back. And like I said, what if he can just annoy Nickal? Keep him kind of his posture controlled and just threaten with things that aren't that. But Bo's going to be like privy to a lot of things early on in the fight. But man, as Craig just starts throwing up attempt after attempt after attempt, it could get complicated for Bo Nickal. I think the most likely scenario here is that Bo Nickal picks up a dominant decision victory where he's on top the entire time and just kind of dominating the wrestling exchanges. If he submits Paul Craig, I will be very impressed. It is no small. I don't care about I don't care about Paul Craig's age, any of that stuff. There's something about jiu-jitsu too, where you can just manage, like when you, this is what I mean. This is why wrestling, not to get off on too much of a tangent, but this is why wrestling and jiu-jitsu are so much different. Wrestling is very fucking fast paced. Like you are fighting for top position. You never want to go belly down. You never want to be on your back. But I can't tell you guys how often I've never wrestled. I mean, I've wrestled in terms of like standing up in jiu-jitsu when I'm in training, but I can't tell you guys like how many times I've been on my back in jiu-jitsu and you will take a break. You'll just chill out. And you can do that if you can kind of keep the pace of things slowed down. So energy expenditure to me is always one of the most important things when you get to this level of fighting, because it's kind of like the little things start to separate you, right? Like same thing when you get to the NFL. If you come from college, there are so many athletes that like, for whatever reason, they don't pan out this way or that, whether it's vision, whether it's this or whether it's the work, whatever, right? It's the same thing when you get to this UFC level. The little things start to matter. And I think energy expenditure is one of those little things that people don't talk about a lot, but it's very important when the fight comes around. So for Bo Nickel, this is going to be a big test in that department, especially if you can't get Craig out of there early. Can you stay committed? Can you stick with the game plan? And can you stay out of all the danger that Paul Craig could potentially put you in? Big fight for Bo Nickel, another showcase fight for him. I think he's going to win by decision, but this is an interesting one to me. All right, next fight on the card. We got Viviana Araújo versus Karine Silva. And once again, you got a 30-year-old Karine Silva. I think she is riding right now. I think I wrote it down. 9-fight winning streak, and she's 4-0 to start off her UFC career. So Silva's no joke. She's very diverse in the striking department. I think she's going to have, again, you get these younger athletes in Silva, who's 30, versus Araújo, who I believe is 37. You get this disparity in age, and I feel like you get significant speed and explosive advantages for the younger fighter. That'll be no different here. However, very similar to the Yontop fight that we talked about earlier, except the difference in this one is that Araújo has a lot of world-class experience, right? She's fought like Alexa Grasso, Amanda Hebos. She's fought some of the top girls in the division and done well in those fights. And again, same kind of thing though, back to the Yontop thing. Araújo does just stay committed to the game plan. Her hands stay up and she marches forward constantly, right? She is willing to apply that pressure on you, and she's a well-rounded martial artist. But man, Silva's one of those girls who I feel like is special. She's so far, I believe, except for her most recent victory over Lipsky, I think she's finished the other 3 opponents in her UFC fight so far via submission, right? She's got 9 knockouts, 8 submission victories, and she's a finisher, pure and simple. And she's got really solid jiu-jitsu. I just think that, again, man, you start getting a little bit older, and especially this is my opinion, in the women's division. You start getting these young athletes that are coming up through the women's division. I feel like there are going to be a lot of leaps in that game because there's such a wide gap a lot of the times between the top of the heap and like that top 10 even in the women's division, right? So if Silva is really like if Silva is really a title challenger, like we think she has the potential to be, we're going to find out when she goes up against Araújo, right? The key for Araújo is going to be the same for like basically every other veteran that's fought this young explosive guy. Keep the pressure on, slow the fight down, stick to the game plan, and hope that you start exploiting some cracks in her game as the fight develops. So I like Silva though. I think she's very creative on the ground. She's very sneaky with the way she set things up. She is explosive. She can knock you out. She's just got so many ways to get it done. And I think we've got an exciting contender in the women's, what is this? It's going to be a flyweight in the women's, I think, flyweight division, right? I got to look it up. Sorry, guys. I'm all over the fucking place today with being sick and blah, blah, blah. Strawweight, flyweight division. Yeah, this is going to be a flyweight fight. So big showing for Karine Silva, and we'll see if she can get it done. She's also, for as young as she is, she has more fights than Viviana Araújo does, right? So experience for her isn't going to really be a big factor, I don't think. Moving on, Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira. This is an exciting rematch, and we never ended up getting the Michael Chandler versus Conor fight. We're probably never going to end up getting it, to be honest. And everyone, I think, the whole time it was happening, all the build up, all the Ultimate Fighter stuff, everyone kind of knew this wasn't going to pan out. Conor seems like he's in a different fucking world. He talks about coming back into the MMA space. He's in the bare knuckle. You see him doing live streams. He's drinking all the time. Man, I just don't see a world where he returns unless it's like some sort of huge event where he makes a fuck ton of money. I mean, I don't know. What worries me about Chandler going into this fight is if you listen to him in interviews, he still seems focused on Conor. Like, you are fighting Charles fucking Oliveira this weekend. This is not just some guy that you're going to blow past and then all of a sudden you get the Conor fight after losing 4 out of your 5 UFC fights. Like this, you have to win this fight, in my opinion. That's the thing that I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about. Michael, he probably won't get cut. He probably will not get cut, right? Because he has that fan-friendly style. But if you lose to Oliveira this weekend, you are 1-4 in the UFC so far, and that's not exactly great. However, I talked about this before, and maybe to say what I said earlier in the Conor Chandler fight won't happen. I feel like part of the selling, like part of the initial like marketing behind Chandler and Conor was that Chandler has dropped some fights in the UFC. He is explosive. He is exciting. It is going to be a fight that the fans want. But Conor coming back after such a long layoff and fighting somebody who's on like a 5-fight win streak doesn't make a lot of sense, right? At least not for Conor and probably not for the UFC as a business. But someone like Chandler who keeps dropping these fights, but he's still got, you know, he can still entertain the fans. He can talk a lot of shit. He's very good on the mic. All that stuff. Fuck, maybe it doesn't matter if he loses to Oliveira this weekend. But in terms of the fight itself, Oliveira, I think Oliveira wins. I just think Oliveira is very precise and sharp on the feet. And one of the things about Chandler that makes it, we're talking a lot about explosiveness on this card. One of the things about Michael Chandler that makes him dangerous is his explosiveness, but also his unpredictability, right? He's short, compact, he's fast, he covers a lot of distance, he's a great wrestler. And not only is he a great wrestler, but he's really, really good in scrambles, right? You saw him drop and hurt Oliveira and almost finish him in that first fight, so that potential is always there. But overall, I just feel that when Oliveira, if he can kind of like avoid some of that early storm from Michael Chandler, I think it'll kind of play out the same way. I feel that Charles is a little bit sharper on the feet. I feel like Charles is way better on the ground in terms of just jiu-jitsu. And while Michael Chandler can scramble, I have a hard time believing that he'll submit Charles Oliveira. So for me, I like Oliveira in this one. I think that he's just a little bit more tactical on the feet. Like I said, a little more precise. And Chandler, that explosiveness, so you can never discount it, right? I mean, if he lands on you, the guy can fucking crack. But all in all, I'm going with Charles Oliveira. And finally, we get to John Jones versus Stipe Miocic, right? And John is returning after taking the heavyweight crown. I guess he earned the empty. It was vacated, right? There was no heavyweight title when he won it from Cyril Gane. So he won the vacant heavyweight title, and now he's defending it for the first time against the greatest heavyweight of all time in a lot of people's eyes, Stipe Miocic. It is hard to pick against John. Right? It's always going to be hard to pick against John, especially when you got Stipe Miocic, who is 42 years old. And I know he had a layoff, but he's coming off that knockout loss to Ngannou. A lot of people, too, they discount Stipe, but in the heavyweight division, man, sometimes it just takes one shot. And if you look at his fight against Ngannou, I felt like he cracked Ngannou and had Ngannou hurt before Ngannou just flatlined him, right? So Stipe can land, he can box, and John probably has a big advantage in terms of like pure wrestling. I would say that John is probably the more technical wrestler. But man, Stipe has been at heavyweight for a long, long fucking time. He knows what those big, strong guys feel like. He knows how to deal with all that. And it can be hard. Just put all the jiu-jitsu, all the wrestling stuff, all the expertise from John Jones aside. It can be hard to just hold those big motherfuckers down, right? Like you always hear the jokes about just get up. I feel like for a lot of heavyweights, they can just get up sometimes. Like they're big guys. It's hard to control. It's hard to cover all the space you need to pin dynamically. And one little mistake can give them that gap they need to just kind of raise up and get back to their feet. I think Stipe has a good enough wrestling base that it is going to be hard for John Jones to get him to the ground, right? Because John has to cover a lot of distance to get down to the legs, right? And enter on any sort of takedown against Stipe. And in terms of just pure boxing, I think Stipe might have an advantage. Now, John has, again, an overall more diverse striking arsenal. He uses his kicks very well, right? He's going to probably be using that front kick that he does to the knees all the time. But I also feel that if Stipe can just kind of fucking stick with the game plan and keep marching him down and boxing him, he might have a chance in this one. I think this is going to be a difficult fight for John Jones, right? Watch him fucking go out there and just blow through him. If he does, all the more impressive. But Stipe's no joke, man. He's had time to recover from everything. His wrestling base is strong. He does pack power. And sometimes, man, they always say power is one of the last things to go. So if he can hit John with that, right? And John gets hit in his career. John got dropped by Dominic Reyes, had a little bit of trouble taking. Now, granted, Reyes is very athletic, right? And I think that posed some problems for John in terms of getting it to the ground until later in the fight. But again, I just think those big guys are hard to take down. I think Stipe will be hard to take down and completely control on the ground. We'll see. I think once it goes to the ground, John will probably actually have an easier time hit it, like landing ground and pound and advancing position and threatening with submissions. But I kind of worry about his ability to get it there in the first place, right? Like, I don't know. We'll see. I'm wondering how that's all going to play out, because trying to get Stipe to the ground is going to be no easy feat. I don't know that we see it happen all that often. I mean, Daniel Cormier did it. Hit that single leg dump. But, man, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. I've been going back and forth on this one despite the odds, but at the end of the day, I just can't bet against John. He's never given you a reason to. He's 5 years the junior of Stipe Miocic, and he looked excellent in his UFC heavyweight debut. So I do think that overall, John will just stick with the game plan. He'll probably beat up the legs. He'll probably be chewing at the legs of Stipe a lot, right? Because if you do have somebody like Stipe who is very powerful, right, and who is a good wrestler, attacking the legs and taking away some of that power is probably going to be a big deal in this fight. I think it'll take away, you want to discourage some of that power, and then things start opening up for you, because John probably is not the heavy-handed one in this matchup. It's Stipe. So we'll see. We'll see. It's a good matchup, and I'm excited to see both John and Stipe back in the octagon. But that's going to wrap this one up, guys. That's all I got. Again, I know a little bit shorter. I wanted to kind of move through things and just kind of get this out there. My voice is all fucking hoarse. I've been coughing. I'm sick. So hopefully it clears up in the next couple of days. And yeah, other than that, guys, enjoy the card this weekend. Have a good one. Thank you for tuning in as always. Bye-bye.